All right, so if you're watching this, you should not be in band on today, which is Thursday, and you should not be in Mrs. Boom's groups that signed up and turned in the permission slip. So everyone else, you are in one of three groups that I'm working in with math on part of the days for success period and reading on the other part of the days in success period. Right now, we're going to introduce ourselves to the idea of what we're doing in mathematics. So in success period, we're all going to be working on substitution. Now, substitution, it seemed kind of tricky when you first saw it, and some of you did have some harder problems, but I promise whatever I gave you the other day when we did our practice questions, you're all going to be able to do within the next month, as long as you're following along and paying attention in class when we go over this. The first thing we have to do is to start with is understand what it means when a number and a letter are touching one another. So if you don't remember, even though I have told it to you already earlier this year, it just simply means multiplication. So you'll want to write that down on your paper that the substitute gave you when you came in for success period. It just means multiplication. There's several different ways we can see multiplication. We know that we have the normal 2 times the 3. You could have the parentheses around the second number. You could have the parentheses around the first number. Or that floating dot also means multiplication. My microphone's acting up here. The second question that we need to understand is, what does it mean by substitute? The substitution, well, if I have a person in here working for me today, even though I'm gone in a seminar, they're substituting for me. In mathematics, it means to put in the place of. So write that down on your paper also. So they're going to give you in the math problems what the number is going to be in place of the letter, and you just put it in and then do the steps of math. So you have 8 different problems that we're going to work through together. You're going to follow along. And the first 4 deal with adding. So on these first 4, then we have the problem that's set up for us. They tell us that k plus 7k. And then they say, well, k is equal to 2. So this is an expression, not an equation. It's an expression because there isn't an answer with it or an equal sign. If it was an equation, then I would know what it was equal to. So if I'm substituting, then all I'm going to do is I'm going to put that 2 in where the k's are. When I'm doing it, I have to make sure that I show them correctly, though. So I always circle my letters so I know what I'm substituting. And then we're going to get to some of them where I'm substituting 2 numbers in for letters or 3 numbers in for letters. So I circle each of them as I go through and I make sure that I substitute them in correctly. And then I rewrite the math problem. So I have, instead of k, I have a 2. Plus, now this is 7k, so I put 7 in parentheses, I put the 2 for the k. The reason I put those parentheses, because if I don't, I end up with 2 plus 72, and that is completely and totally the wrong answer. So I don't want to leave off those parentheses. Those parentheses will be important every single time I solve these. Then I have to think about my order of operations. Order of operations, once again, tell me that I'm going to do absolute value, square root, exponent, and parentheses first. We're going to get into absolute value here either this week or next in math. So we're going to be adding to this group that we have. Then I have my multiplication and addition from left to right. And then I have my addition and subtraction from left to right. There shouldn't be anything left in my math problem once I've gone through all of my steps of orders of operation. So that tells me I have to start with my multiplication first. So I multiply that. 7 times 2 is 14. So I'm going to repeat my math problem. Now I'm going to have 2 plus 14. The biggest problem that 6th graders struggle with when it comes to algebra is they don't want to rebuild the math problem. They think it takes too much time. So they try crossing it out, writing on top of it, so on and so forth. Number 1, when I ask you to show work and I show you exactly how I want you to show work, this is what I will expect for you to get that point for showing your work. If you're one that you do all sorts of chicken scratches, erasing, writing on top of everything else, I'm not going to give you credit. And the reason I'm so picky about this is because you all have to take algebra before you graduate high school. You all have to take 2 years of algebra before you graduate high school. And every algebra teacher that I've met, either in my own life or up at Western Boone, they require you to show step by step your math so they can follow and see what you're doing. If we get into the practice now, then junior high and then those 2 years of required math will be much easier. So simply do what I ask and rewrite the math problem every time I change something. So I do my 7 times 2, which is my 14. I rewrite it with the 14 in there. And that leaves me with my last step of the order of operations, simply adding. So I have 2 plus 14. That's going to give me 16. That's my answer. Going to the second one then. Doing the same thing. I know I'm going to substitute one number. So for the x, wherever the x is, I'm going to put in a 7. So I rewrite it with the 7 in there. Remember, if it's just an x by itself, I can put a 7. But if it's next to a number, I have to have those parentheses so I know that they are separated. So I'm going to write my 5 parentheses, meaning times 7, plus, and then 9 parentheses times the 7 again. Once again, if I don't have my parentheses, I end up with a crazy answer because I'd end up with 57 plus 97, and that's not the correct answer. Once I have that, then I know I have to do, once again, my order of operations. My order of operations tell me I'm going to do multiplication and multiplication before I do addition. So I'm going to rewrite my math problem now with my multiplication answers. 5 times 7 is 35. 9 times 7 is 63. And I know I'm adding those together. Then I'm just left with that last step, and I can write down my answer underneath. So I know 5 and 3 is 9, and 5 and 3 is 8, and 3 and 6 is 9. So I know my final answer is 98. So this shows my work. By rewriting them, I get my final answer. So I get both points that I would give you on the assignment. All right, question 3, still doing addition. So I have 2f plus 6f, where the f is going to be equal to the 3. So I'm going to rewrite it, once again putting the 3 in wherever there is an f. So I have my 2 going in next to, in parentheses, therefore, a 3. So I don't write down 23. That's going to throw my answer off. I have to show that it is 2 times 3 plus, and then I have a 6 next to the f. So I have 6 in parentheses next to 3. This is going to be part of showing my work. I've rewritten my problem, substituting the 3 in where the f's are. Now I do my order of operations. I have to do my multiplication first. So I know 2 times 3 is 6, and I know 6 times 3 is 18. I rewrite my math problem with those answers. So my last step then, according to my order of operations, is going to be addition. At 6 plus 18, it's going to give me 24. Once again, I've showed my work. I get the right answer. I get 2 points. Now, number 4 then, the last of the addition, I have 9c plus c, where c is equal to what? C is equal to 4, right? So what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to go ahead and solve this one, pause the video, come back, check your work, make sure you're good to go. All right, so hopefully you've shown your work, you have rebuilt your problem a couple of times as you've worked through it and got to an answer. So the first thing you had to do is write the math problem, substituting the 4 in for each of the c's. So you should have written on your first line then, 9 in parentheses, so times 4, plus, and then the 4 by itself. Now, it would not hurt if you put parentheses around that. It's just not required because it's not touching another number. Then you should have done a next step, another line, where you solved your multiplication and rewrote your problem. So 9 times 4 is 36, brought down your addition, brought down your 4, because you followed your order of operations. And then finally, you would have your answer. So hopefully you have 40 as your final answer. So we should be good to go. And if not, if you didn't get this correct, rewind it and go through the steps and figure out what it is that you might have messed up on. So then the second half to the substituting introduction is subtracting. So how does the subtracting and the addition work and compare to one another? Well, they're the exact same thing. The only difference is in my last step, instead of adding, I'm going to subtract. So I have 4 we're going to practice here. So I have on number 5, you'll see on your paper, 9s minus s, where s is equal to the 5. Once again, I'm going to rewrite the math problem, but instead of s's, I'm going to put the 5 in for each of the s's that I have. So rewriting it, I should have 9 in parentheses my 5 minus 5 because the s stands alone. Once again, if you want to put parentheses around that final 5, it won't change it either way. It's fine. It's just not required. Then my order of operations tell me that I have to do my multiplication first. You should show that 9 times 5 is 45, and then copy the rest of your problem down. So 9 times 5 is 45 minus the 5. And then your final step is just solving for it because it's left with subtraction. 45 minus 5 just leaves me with 40. Shouldn't be too difficult, right? So we'll get into the harder stuff a little later. Right now we're just practicing how the substitution process works. So on number 6 then, you have 6x, 6h, minus 4h, where h is equal to 6. We're going to rewrite the problem, substituting with the 6 for each of the h's. If it's touching a number, remember, put those parentheses around it so it's separated, and you can identify what math you're supposed to do. So you need to rewrite it, substituting with the 6. So you should have 6 in parentheses, a 6 for the h. So that tells me it's 6 times 6. On the other side, I should have 4 and in parentheses, another 6. So that tells me it's 4 times 6. Once I have it written out, that's the first part of showing my work, then I'm going to write my new line where I'm going to do my multiplication first because my order of operations tells me to start with multiplication. 6 times 6 is 36, and I know I'm subtracting. 4 times 6 is 24. Then I can subtract. Now, at any time, if you need your handy-dandy calculator while you're doing these, it's fine. Or you could look at it as, well, I know 6 minus 4 is 2, and 3 minus 2 is 1, so I know my final answer is going to be 12. All right, so number 7 gives us 9b minus 4b, where b is equal to a 3. Have to substitute them in. So my first step of showing work is writing the problem where there's a 3 in place of my b's. That's what we're substituting. So where my 3 is, I'm going to have a 9 times my 3. That's what the parenthesis says. And I know I'm going to have a 4 times a 3 because that's what those parentheses say. Now, a second step of showing my work is to do those multiplications, because according to operations, that has to be my next step. And then I just bring down my subtraction sign. 9 times 3 is 27, and 4 times 3 is 12. I know I'm subtracting. Then I'm just left with getting to the right answer. 27 minus 12 is going to be 15. That leaves you with one more left on your paper. I want you to solve for it. Check your answer then. Once you have it written down, come back to me. So hopefully you have your answers written down. You've showed all your work. You have to have at least 2 steps shown in there to get credit for showing work. The first step was to just simply rewrite it where the 2 is substituted in for the w's. So you should have first written down 5 times the 2 with the 2 in parentheses, so you know it's not 52, minus a 2. And then your second step for showing your work would be to do your multiplication, because the order of operations tell you to start there. So 5 times 2 is 10 minus 2. And now, after you've showed your work and your steps, you just get your right answer, and 10 minus 2 you should have gotten 8. So I don't think this is difficult. I just think it looked really weird when you were first trying to do it. So hopefully as we build on these, you'll be able to do these with me. We're going to be substituting for 2 numbers. We're going to be substituting with 3 numbers, and we're also going to be multiplying and dividing. So we'll go through it slowly so I make sure that you understand it, but you got to follow along as we're doing it. So if you turn your paper over, you're going to see 4 different questions. What I want you to do is I want you to solve, showing all of your steps that I've asked for, so you get credit for your work, and get the right answer. Once you have all 4 solved, then turn it into the math slot. I'll know what they are. Make sure your name's on it, and then you're good to go. The rest of the success period then, once you have that turned in, is yours to do any work that you still have, such as making sure your trade book is finished for tomorrow.